Well, here we are. I'm excited to jump on the call today and have a conversation with my mate, Merrick. Merrick, why don't you introduce yourself? I know we're both, working in the field of sport and performance psychology, have an interest in flow state training, and give yourself maybe a little introduction and share what you're hoping to kind of explore maybe today as well.
Yeah, definitely. No, thanks for the call here. I think we're gonna have some fun and a little mind jam. So yeah, my name is Marek or Marek, if you can roll your R's, and most people can't. So I'm a mental performance consultant.
I was in Mexico this last month, and I tell you, I cannot roll my R's if I needed to. It's
Yeah,
difficult.
Spanish people can. That's the good thing, right? Nice. Yeah. So I'm a mental performance consultant based out of Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. Professional member of the Canadian Sports Psychology Association, and so I work primarily with athletes, but also just performers in general, musicians, students, entrepreneurs. I mean, everyone, life is a performance, right? We're all performers in something, and especially at these times, I think we're all performing right now in some capacity with what's going on. And I also work with actually the Special Olympics, where I'm the manager coach development. So I work primarily with the coaches there, but with some athletes as well. I've had some one-on-one sessions with some of the athletes. It's a really interesting experience. And yeah, so my main kind of jam is mindfulness and flow states, just like kind of Brent here. And definitely he's a big inspiration for me and then what he's kind of doing. So I want to kind of riff off him. So let's do this.
Well, for those that might not be familiar with myself, I'm trained as a sport and clinical psychologist, master's in sports psych, doctor in clinical psych, and I did my dissertation focus specifically on flow state and how mindfulness-based training can facilitate, getting more flow, but also getting into flow in behaviors and actions that lead to consequences that we're most desiring, and particularly avoiding kind of the dark side trappings of flow. So getting in flow in areas that can lead to negative consequences in life. So certainly Merrick and I have a lot of similar connections, so I'm stoked to jump in. So what I thought we could kind of frame this discussion around is this kind of collective story or experience we're all having right now. And that's, during the current pandemic, we're all having our own unique internal experiences, whether it's thoughts coming up, emotions, feelings, memories, images, and we're all relating to these internal experiences in different ways. And the science of high performance and psychology really teaches and gives some insight on how to relate to what's arising within us in a way that helps us not get so fused and stuck in that internal experience and no longer able to kind of live the meaningful life that we're hoping to. And I think during times of crisis, it's very hard not to get lost in our internal world and lose participation in the outer world and keep moving forward. So I kind of had a quote I wanted to share, Merrick, Marcus Aurelius quote that I thought might kind of give us something nice to kind of jump off from. So this quote says, men seek retreats for themselves in the country, by the sea, in the hills, and you yourself are particularly prone to this yearning. But all this is quite unphilosophic. When it is open to you at any time you want to retreat into yourself. No retreat offers someone more quiet and relaxation than the retreat into his own mind, especially if he can dip into thoughts there that can put him at immediate and complete ease. And by ease, I simply mean a well-ordered life. So continuously give yourself this retreat and renew yourself. The doctrines you will visit there should be few and fundamental, sufficient at one meeting to wash away all your pain and send you back free of resentment at what you must rejoin. And so I'll just open up right away. What comes up for you when I kind of share that quote? And it's the piece I really love is, to dip into thoughts there which put him at immediate and complete ease. And by ease, I simply mean a well-ordered life.
Yeah, and I think both of us have an appreciation for the inner world. And I think that's why we're in this field, right? And we're kind of uniquely positioned in a way to deal with the situation. And I think we're all forced in a way right now to look inwards, right? And I think a lot of people are struggling and they're uncomfortable with it because it's a lot of the questions and introspective stuff that they tend to avoid and not want to kind of look into. And then so I think this is where a lot of the collective anxiety is happening, where we're forced to be alone with our thoughts, with ourselves, and most of us don't like ourselves, right? And so I think it's a unique place where I think all of us need to do this, and in a way, this is an opportunity to almost force us to look inwards, which in turn will help the outer world, right? So I think that this is something I've been in the sense training for, right? This is what mindfulness is, a training for the worst day of your life, right? And so this is kind of what that kind of training helps with. So in a way, I mean, I think I'm coping quite well with relatively what's kind of going on. There are moments where I kind of veer off track and I get lost in thought and preoccupied with the future and stuff. But I always kind of come back to that inner world. I think initially it's tough getting into that inner space. Because once you start looking at it, you realize how much baggage there is. But after time, it has less of a hold on you. And I think because we've put in some work already, it's like we can better cope, better, deal with what's kind of going on.
One thing I wanted to kind of jump on there, I know you do a lot of mindfulness training yourself, and something I've really been trying to share and think deeply about is the utilization of mindfulness at a time like this to explore that internal world. And you said something earlier about we tend to avoid the things that we find challenging about life, about ourselves. And sometimes the way that I've seen mindfulness articulated, Merrick, it's almost as if it's being substituted as another way to avoid, another way to feel good, to relax, to quiet the mind. And we all know that the experience of mindfulness and in meditation, you get a chance to, if you're going in with that intention of not avoiding, you get to see everything. You get to make real contact with it. And my training and understanding is learning to be present with it without getting lost in all the evaluations, the reasons and story, and just to almost decondition my fear of all that arises within meditation, as opposed to going in there just to calm and feel good, which we know, might work for the short term and might give me a feeling of being calm and relaxed. But if it's used as an avoidance strategy, then I just continually try to avoid what's arising, and I never really get to be fully conscious.
The desires are not desire in itself, right? And I love you posted that recently, and I saw that, and I appreciate that you've done that, right? I also share that same view of that mindfulness, right? It's seen as a way to get rid of thoughts, get rid of an emotion, get rid of a feeling, and get rid of an experience. Rather, it's about tuning into the experience, right? And this is I think where most athletes and just individuals in general struggle when they first get into mindfulness. It's like, oh, I'm supposed to get rid of my thoughts. I'm supposed to quiet the mind completely. But I tell them that's impossible. You can't shut off the mind. Like, close your eyes and for 30 seconds and don't think about anything. It's like you're going to think about something, right? So it's about changing your relationship with that present moment experience, like you were saying, right? So I think that's the key piece that's missing right now, maybe in what's being put out there in the world with people sharing mindfulness as a way to move away from what's happening, rather than, hey, let's tune into this. Let's see what kind of lesson is learned from this. And then one quote that I have comes to mind is from Shung Tzu, the Chinese philosopher. He says, "The perfect man or woman employs his mind as a mirror. It grasps nothing, yet it refuses nothing. It receives but does not keep." So in that same way, it's not kind of taking anything in as good or bad and not getting rid of anything. It's just being with it, right? So
exactly. And I think that, you mentioned earlier, well, I'll just build off this quote. So this ability to just be with and not hold on to, a lot of different approaches, philosophies of how to get to that state. I think it'd be helpful for us to kind of run through, kind of our view on what that looks like, what that actually is, practically speaking. And so what I would share is, for me, as a therapist, utilizing ACT, which is called acceptance commitment therapy, similar to a lot of the work that you use with mindfulness and acceptance-based approaches in sports psych, is viewing the sense of who we are, ourself, as as a context and as a process, as opposed to the content that arises within our consciousness. So let me kind of step back. So if we were to kind of engage in this activity together, if I were to, just ask you to feel your feet flat on the floor. So I'm going to do the same, feel my feet flat on the floor, and kind of just notice who's noticing your feet flat on the floor. And now if we just kind of feel our back on our chair, and then just notice who's noticing our back on our chair. And now if I were to ask you and me to just kind of be present to, that who is noticing, are they always present? And if so, are they good or bad? Or are they just the being? And so I think we tend to kind of identify that noticer as what we call that pure observer, and we don't give it that label. We recognize it's a context that all thoughts and feelings arise within. And when I talk about kind of transcending the ability to get caught in labels, that's that piece that I think is so key to not get caught up in almost our ontological addiction to a sense of self, and rather connect to that observer, which is yeah, I'm curious. I'll let you riff on that.
Yeah, and I think I'm in the same kind of school of thought on that. I think I don't know if you're familiar with Sam Harris's like meditation app, and I think he he puts a really good perspective on this, and he says, who is the thinker behind the thought, right? And when you start to look for it, you see it's not kind of really there, and then you almost have that moment. It's like, oh, there's a direct experience there. And there is no separation between the thinker and the thought, right? And so I don't say my training, because I know real kind of formal training in kind of like in meditation practices, but it's more my own personal research into it. But mine, I tend to go by the school of Zen Buddhist traditions, where it's that kind of direct experience. And the best, I think, example of that is the idea of a finger pointing to the moon, right? Where the finger is pointing towards the direct experience, but we get so caught up in this finger when we're missing out on this whole heavenly glory kind of thing, right? And this is where we get caught up in just trying the tool rather than the actual kind of experience. And this is where, with the modernization, the mindfulness of stuff, I think this is where it's getting lost, and we're looking for this tool to save us. But it's like, if you dive deeper, it's like, who's the one wanting to be saved, right? And it's like, where's that coming from? And then you start kind of pulling back the layers, and then that's, I think, when you kind of, in a sense, I don't want to say level up, because that's implying that I'm kind of leveling up in some way, but it's you're starting to see it, right? Whatever it kind of means for you. I don't know if that kind of makes sense, but
yeah, it does, and it brings up an interesting paradox of life. And you mentioned Lao Tzu earlier, kind of Confucius thinking, and they really see life in many ways as a paradox. And one of those is, while we're this, we have this observer awareness and consciousness, we also have our own unique desires and needs and skills and passions and desire to express ourselves, to develop a sense of competence in a skill. And we're goal-driven individuals. We like flow because get completely engaged in what we're doing. And so while we have this observer perspective, we also have this perspective that really enjoys being engaged. And so the balance between the art of being optimally engaged in creating and achieving, and also staying grounded in that pure observer of the experience, is quite a dance, I think.
That's where I'm interested in your thoughts, because this is where I think I struggle with. This is the things I struggle with the most, is the idea of striving versus being content. Striving and contentment. So I want to, this is why I went to school, this is why I do all these things, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. Like, I want to achieve things, but at the same time, like, something's pulling me back. It's like, why do I want to post this thing? Why do I want to provide this thing for people? It's like, should I be maybe just content with kind of what I have? And then this is where I'm stuck. There's the two sides of me pulling towards being observed by others and being kind of known and having a reputation, which is, I guess, maybe ego. And then there's that the contentment piece. Like, hey, no, like I'm content with what I have. I have everything I need, right? So why do I kind of strive for that? And I'm curious to where maybe you sit on that fence, or where you're at in terms of.
Yeah, I think that in some ways the high performance path can be a lonely path if we're not connected to a greater picture, or a problem or challenge that we're trying to help solve. And so I think a lot of the work around staying ultimately engaged over the long term, and perhaps it's a way to reason to be obsessive, is having a big question that we're trying to help solve. And I think that that drive towards wanting to be engaged and achieve and accomplish, if it's mitigated or at least seen through the lens of benefiting others, it can help tame the ego. And because we recognize that it's not about ourselves, and not only tame the ego so that we don't get into our own shit and challenges, but because our own limited ego it doesn't have the drive of feeling connected to so many others. So I don't know, it's a really interesting question you've posed, and I think that's one way that we try to work with the Flow Research Collective is we use this kind of passion recipe. So it's going from what we're curious about, looking what our passions are, and then again turning it into a purpose and finding those big reasons and why we want to help solve problems and challenges. And that's the way that I'm kind of viewing it through.
You think
And
there's amount of ego is appropriate, or maybe I think, because I
oh
mean,
yes,
let's
yes,
put that
the
back,
ego
you
is
can't find, you realize you can keep pulling back, the desire to not have an ego is a desire in itself. It's like, so is maybe some amount necessary, or we can't run away from it? I don't know.
I don't think you and I we would not be sitting here if we didn't have an ego,
Yeah.
and we wouldn't have accomplished completing graduate school and everything that we have. So an ego is absolutely necessary, and the one way I think to manage the ego is to make fun of it, to notice it. I'll be in a call with Steven and whatnot, and he'll be like, listen guys, my big ego is in the room here. So there's acknowledgement of our skill, our craft, our development of our identity, and also a way to play with it and be light on it. So it's something that brings us joy and not restriction, and not something that needs to be taken seriously. So I would say the ego is we wouldn't be here if we didn't have it. And it's especially in a time like this, the ego often is what can give us a sense of security, knowing that we have the skills based on what we've accomplished in the past to overcome this current pandemic, and faith in ourselves. I think if we were egoless, perhaps we would be at peace, but we might not take the next necessary precautions to protect ourselves and others and be as thoughtful as we could. So yeah, it's quite a paradox working with the ego. It's a good question.
No, I love that perspective where you're recognizing that it's in the room, it's here, and you're using humor. It's like, oh, there you are, and then you're kind of sitting kind of with it. And in a sense, that's like the direct experience, because we can't run away from it. So let's might as well be with it, kind of thing. And I think, and so that's super interesting, and I like that perspective. And I mean, and during these times, I think what I'm doing right now, I mean, I'm curious to hear what practices you're doing now, but I mean, I think this is a good opportunity to kind of be introspective. And what I'm doing right now is re-evaluating my objective. As we know, clear objectives are massive flow trigger, and then I'm very good at that kind of those micro objectives, but I'm struggling with the macro. It's like, what is that kind of life purpose, philosophy kind of piece? It's like, what's that kind of objective? And I've been in a way, I've been kind of avoiding asking that question for a while, but I'm kind of like forced into it now. It's like reevaluating what is that ultimate objective. And so where I'm at right now is, I mean, I have the ultimate piece, I think, is I'm on a pursuit of mental mastery. But there's that kind of a caveat to that. It's not really pursuit of mental mastery, it's mastering the pursuit. But in that sense, it's almost a very vague objective, and it's like, how do you kind of master that pursuit? And so I'm curious to what are your kind of objectives, and what do you kind of, do you have an ultimate target you're working towards, or is that kind of maybe vague for you?
Great question. And I love that quote, the mastery of the pursuit of mastery. Very process daily kind of reorientation towards your craft. So, one thing that comes up to mind specifically during a time like this is getting those very, very clear, specific goals, right? We know as much clear as our goals can be, the more we can engage in them and really accomplish, because they're measurable, they're realistic. And so for me, one thing I'm focusing on is doing a nightly to-do list. So when we do the nightly to-do list in the evening, when I wake up in the morning, my brain power, my self-control muscle is preserved by not having to develop my plan and attack for the day. So I have that worked out. So it lowers my cognitive load, and it gives me that needed structure to get into flow. We know that, an old definition of flow is structure and consciousness. And so the clarity of the day through the daily to-do list is absolutely essential for me. It also keeps me engaged through the day optimally, because I get that reward of ticking it off and crossing it off. So that's one tool and tactic that's been really helpful for me. To be honest as well, I'm just getting into self-quarantine mode right now. I was in Mexico for this past month, as you know, and it was business as usual there. So I'm struggling, this first kind of 2 days here, and catching up on the news and really getting reoriented to what's occurring in the world, and some fears that are coming up. And what I'm working on is observing those fears, acknowledging them, as opposed to saying I'm anxious or I'm scared. I might say I'm noticing I'm having thoughts of being scared, or I'm noticing I'm thoughts of fear, and not getting fused in with them. And again, reorient myself. If I'm not as able to be productive towards my goals, I want to reorient myself over and over again to what I value, and just making sure I'm taking step towards that progress, or towards those values, and to gauge my sense of well-being based off that, as opposed to maybe some specific outcome goals that I'm striving for, which is again a balance between, being connected to my values versus maybe doing and really accomplishing some outcome goals that I'm kind of playing with. But yeah, it's like I said, I'm just kind of getting hit with all this news and adjusting on the fly here myself.
Are you more of a structured routine guy, or do you like things kind of open? Because I mean, I was thinking about this, like, do I make a list for myself, a daily list? Okay, I'm gonna do this time, this time, and I never like doing that. I like have things a little bit more open ended. And the way I kind of do that is, instead of, oh, I'm gonna work out, Monday, Wednesday, Friday at this time, I say, okay, this week I want to accomplish 3 to 4 workouts, right? And at the end of the week, I kind of check it off. I'm like, what's your kind of process?
Well, I will agree with you that I very much so like not having structure. However, I perform and accomplish a hell of a lot more when I have structure. So for me, it's utilizing the to-do list is key, but I don't naturally want to do that. And I think that's, the skill we learn in mindfulness to enact, to move towards things and have the willingness to experience that experiential discomfort and still move in that direction, is something that I'm continually need to embrace the struggle phase, move towards what's uncomfortable. And for me, it certainly is having structure, because I can thrive under no structure, but at the end of the day, while I may have enjoyed it, am I accomplishing what's most meaningful for me? Often not. I'll often move towards things that provide maybe immediate gratification, a sense of immediate kind of pleasure, and not those long-term goals. So structure is good for me. If not, I wouldn't have accomplished.
So let's take let's take a deeper dive into that. What if we can view this time as maybe a time to not be as productive? Because I think, and maybe this is just me, maybe my own thoughts on this, but like, I think our society is very always on. We're always like, we're always pushing productivity. And I think that's another piece maybe why people are struggling with, because they're not being as productive, and they're struggling with, I need to be productive. Like, and so maybe is that the ego saying, I need to be productive, I need to do this. It's like, what if, is it okay? Maybe, hey, can we just not do anything for a while? Is that so bad? And then that's where I'm at. It's like, maybe I could do more stuff on my website, do this and this and this. Like, What if I just sit here and just watch how am I reacting to things instead? Where do you lie on that?
I would say that, one of the biggest things with the Flow Research Collective, working with all these high performers, there comes a point that I see with almost everyone I work with, that there's a question of what's it all about? What's all this drive for? What's this going to get me? And am I enjoying the process itself? Right? So what the hell is, if we're going to achieve so much, if we're not finding any joy in it, it's a good time to kind of check in. So I think the willingness that you're communicating, as far as really observing what it's like to just be, gives us opportunity to understand, to confront all of human experience and what it is to step back and to observe and to have that willingness. And for me, I would just say, I give it time of the day for me to worry. I give it time of the day for me to be mindful and to disengage. I try to build in that structure to get some of that time, but it's important for me to structure it within those time periods and not allow that wanting to just observe and be a kind of a participant as opposed to a competitor in those time slots, and not let it leak into other areas of my day when I really want to kind of achieve and accomplish. And maybe you have some feedback or thoughts on that.
I think what helps me is I use a metaphor of, I have two spirit animals. I use two animals that help me. So I have, as you can see, I have, get this out of the way. There's a little fox on there.
Yeah, I love it.
So I love it because he's in the middle of winter. He's kind of just sitting there, eyes closed. It's very appropriate for what's going on right now, but especially in Edmonton because we still got snow. But so the fox for me is he's a go-getter. He's a resourceful. He'll find his way around. He'll get things done. He's kind of patient, but he's the one who gets things done. But I also have my other piece of me. The other side of me is the sloth, and that does not necessarily mean he's lazy, but it's more slow down. Don't rush. Be mindful, right? Taking what's kind of going on. I used to always think I need to be only this one fox, only this piece, and I would neglect to feed the sloth, so to speak. And so that's how I kind of managed, like, okay, now it's time for the fox. I remember I gave a talk at a conference. My first talk at a conference was a big deal for me. And so the whole time leading up to it, I was in fox mode, like, yeah, I'm doing this, and I was in flow. I did the talk, went really well. And then afterwards, this was in Kananaskis in the mountains, and there's the spa there, and there's like a little pool with this cold water pool. And this was like in November, so it was cold. And part of me is like, you piece of shit, you go in that pool, like you test yourself, like you gotta test your manhood kind of thing, and which I usually would have done it, but I caught myself. I'm like, no, like I'm in sloth mode now. Fox, you've had your time. I don't need to. I'm gonna go in a hot tub. I'm gonna just sit there. Like I don't need to tap into you right now. So that's kind of how I kind of manage it, and that's tied into my my overall philosophy, which is four words: live slow, find flow. So I think that encompasses those two animals perfectly for me. It's live slow, right, with that sloth piece, but find flow, find those moments of peak experiences, and that's kind of the fox kind of driving it. I don't know if that resonates with you at all, or.
Beautiful. Well, it resonates really specifically to my dissertation work, where I my formalized theory of high performance included the balance and the ability to shift between a mindfulness state of consciousness and flow state. And so you articulated that beautifully, and particularly why I found my theory for optimal performance included those two states is because with mindfulness, we get the ability to take in information, adapt, and adjust, so that when we're finding flow, we're finding it in optimal experiences. So for instance, in that story you gave, perhaps jumping into flow and taking action in regards to kind of jumping in that cold pool wasn't really serving a valued end for you at that point. And opposed, you caught yourself saying, oh, this was serving my ego. I don't really need to move in this direction. I'm in sloth mode right now. And that ability to almost, with those two spirit animals, you've you've given a label to your internal dialogue so you can catch it, right? Oh, this is the fox, this is the sloth. And so what you're doing there is you're developing emotional awareness, and you're developing the ability to have that diffusion as from yourself as the observer to these different trains of thoughts that you have. And so you can choose and have that mastery over which one is appropriate for the situation. So I think that's really brilliant. Yeah.
I think the struggle now is like in this time now, it's like which one do I tap into? I think this is where kind of taking a step back and really assessing which one needs to be kind of fed right now. And I think that's where maybe a lot of us are struggling. I don't know, but I don't know, do you tap into any metaphors like that? Do you have any spirit animals or any other?
I've never been good with the spirit animals one. I'm not one for angels and things of that nature.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't necessarily like it's not have to be a, view it as whatever way you want it. I just call it, yeah.
Yeah. No, I think for me, I think it's a very good question as far as how much time we're spending in kind of a mindfulness contemplative mode and how much time we're spending in action. I think first and foremost, to build off some of your points from earlier, it's probably an appropriate time, given how fast we usually move at, to say, hey, this is an opportunity for me to just be here now, to fully retreat within myself, and to see of all that's arising within this moment, and to allow that willingness to be with our internal experience, to gauge how do we want to adapt and adjust so that when we emerge from this current state we're all in, we're taking action towards what's most fucking important for us. And
Yeah.
so I'd say over indexing on the mindfulness piece right now seems quite appropriate. And with that said, there's some people who are in situations where their family are ill, there's financial insecurity, and they might not have the privilege that I have, certainly, to not have to take that immediate action. So for those people, having the capacity to use that sense of urgency and consequences to force them to get into more flow, that's a game changer. So the ability to not be in that mindfulness state is adaptive in that state. But yeah, so that's kind of what comes up for me.
Yeah, no, I think that's an important piece to make is there are people right now that are struggling and don't have the privilege to think about the next few years because they're all thinking about what's going on if you have food on the table, right? But I think that mindfulness piece can help both camps of people. One, to drive them into flow to, hey, okay, what's important now? Let's take a step back. What's the objective? Okay, what can I do to get there? I need to do this and this and this. And for the other person who has a little bit more time on their hands, to kind of maybe reevaluate and see, okay, if I'm in this position, can I help maybe in other people? Can I do this? Like, what is my role in this kind of situation? So I think that's important distinction to make is there's different people. I think the practice of gratitude is huge for both as well. It's like, okay, I'm okay, right? I'm healthy. I have a roof over my head, right? There's worse situations to be in, right? So it's important to over-index on gratitude as well, which is, a form of mindfulness practice, right? So.
No, I am 100% on board. And what I'm curious to kind of lean into in our discussion now is, I started with that quote of Marcus Aurelius about retreating within oneself. We've talked a lot about mindfulness. We're talking a little bit about gratitude, and now we're kind of talking about those who are in current situations who might not be able to fully retreat within themselves at this moment, and how do we I'm almost feeling stuck in the moment because it's like, how do we support those individuals? But it's like, they're not going to be jumping on this video possibly, right?
Yeah.
And so what's our role as fellow human beings to support the larger picture? And for me, that's where sometimes the contemplative mode it goes against some of my cultural values growing up in the West, being individualistic, kind of having entrepreneurial models in my life that are about like, how do we solve these problems? So it's very hard for me to find that balance between mindfulness and flow.
I think because we're so individualistic, tap into other cultures of shared experience. I think it's not like we're on here to, hey, we're going to talk about goal setting for an hour. It's like, no, it's like we're sharing an experience that we're both having. And I think in that way we can help. That's what's helping people is like, hey, we're by no means an expert in how to deal with COVID-19, right? It's like we have our own things. It's like, so let's talk it out. Let's figure it out. The objective is just, hey, we're in explorative phase, and it's like let's see what's working and what's not working, and then and having that community piece. And I think this is what, in a way, I always see any bad like yin yang and black and white. There's always a good side to a bad experience. I mean, after 2018 or 1918 Spanish flu, right? The market went up substantially, right? After World War II, even though Germany, Japan, and Italy, they crashed, but then they became one of the greatest economies afterwards too, right? So there's always, ups and downs, and it's not like this is going to last forever, right? Just like your internal experience is not going to last forever. The bad feeling, the depression, the anxiety you're feeling is not going to last forever. And if we view it as such, that helps. The same thing with, I think, with the external piece, and that's what's helping me through this time is like, this is gonna end eventually, right? So it's a good time to slow down and tap into kind of what's real, I think. And
we're like you said, I think it is an appropriate time to slow down, and for those that are able to, because we're going to emerge from this current time with a whole new world. And so I'm going to be mailing you a copy of Stephen's new book, The Future is Faster Than You Think, which really outlines all these new technologies that are converging and transforming so many different industries. And I think that, as far as the mindfulness time that I would spend right now, it would be, reading literature such as that and getting awareness and really connect with the field that we're in now, and whoever else is watching this, your industry, and how utilizing this time to read something such as The Future is Faster Than You Think can help reorient you to the world we're re-entering, and to know how you can pivot in a way that enables you to optimize the digital world, the converging technologies, community and collective, in a way that can enable accelerated growth in your field. And so I think it's an exciting time as well. I'm right on board with you.
Yeah, no, I agree. And there's gonna be so many lessons learned from this, and things are gonna change, but that's the only thing that's constant and real is change, right? And I think this shows the more we cling on to things. Oh, I was doing so well. My soccer team, my favorite soccer team, Liverpool. They waited 30 years to win the Premier League, and they're 25 points ahead from the second place team, and it 6 more points, 2 more games basically to win. They would have won it, but it got postponed. And it's like 30 years they've waited. It's like, but like you can't cling on to that. It's like, okay, it's what if when this all comes back around, that win is going to mean so much more, right? And it's kind of reframing in that way. It's like, hey, we've been through this struggle, and they didn't want us to win it, but we still kind of found a way. So it's like having that reframing into a positive framework, as cliche as it sounds, it's gonna set you up better for success rather than the world is ending, right?
So maybe absolutely. So maybe a good place for us to kind of begin to wrap up our call here today is, why don't we, and let me know what you think, kind of reflect on, if we were to reflect on this time period, 10 years, 20 years down the line, and reflect, we can do it individually if you'd like, but maybe more specifically for society as a whole, how would you like us to ideally have moved through this period of time? I'm curious if you can riff on that at all.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Mm-hmm.
I think I would ideally like to see us, I can go back to what we were talking about, just slowing down a bit and seeing that maybe productivity and doing more is not as important as being more, right? I think that's what's maybe, hopefully it's gonna be a byproduct of this. We're gonna find out that there's other things more important. There's family, there's immediate experience, that's going to be important for us. Not to maybe cling on to things as much, whatever that is for you. I mean, understanding it's a harsh lesson, but it's the ultimate lesson, is that it's going to change. Things are going to change. So the more we kind of move with it, right? Like, just like Bruce Lee says, right? Like, be water, my friend. You can't, water doesn't crash through the rock. It finds its kind of way around. And so it's like, that's what I hope we learn collectively and individually. It starts individually, and it becomes that collective idea of, hey, let's slow down here. There's something's trying to tell us something. Let's take it easy. But the worry is that we'll come back to our old ways, but we'll forget.
No, I appreciate your answer. And, I was thinking for myself, it's, we are such an individualistic culture, and I, by nature, am quite an introvert, and I stay to myself often. And that costs me a lot in my life. It cost me a lot of connection with others, with family, and not being as engaged and present with people, and caught in my own ideas or things I'm working on. And, I love that, and it gets me into flow. I lose the ability to connect and make meaningful memories with people that I care the most about. And so this has been a scary time. For me particularly, think about some family members and their health, my father particularly, and just being scared of what would happen. And so I'm hoping that when I look back on this time period for myself and for the whole collective, is that we truly remember the feeling of being interconnected with each other, and so that when we're moving forward, we're continuing to move in a direction that connects us more with people, as opposed to maybe just accelerating our own growth or progress or identity.
Yeah, amen. And so, I mean, you start off with a quote from Marcus Aurelius. I want to end off with a quote from Seneca, another Stoic philosopher. I just found this randomly. So the wise man, again, or woman, is neither raised up by prosperity or cast down by adversity, for always he has striven to rely predominantly on himself and to drive all joy from himself. Right. So I think that's a good place maybe to end it. And so this is either prosperity or adversity. We always have ourselves. So let's make sure we're training ourselves to cope with adversity.
So where do people, I love that, Merrick, where do more people kind of connect with you and follow you and kind of learn more of what you're training and offering?
Yeah. So best is the website, flowperformancepsych.com. As you can tell, right? Flow, we all love flow. So that's kind of how it started, is flowperformancepsych.com. Instagram is a good place. Post some stuff there. So that's Marek T. Komar. So MAREKT as in Thomas, KOMAR.
Your name's Thomas as well.
No, it's Tadeusz. Ted. I just
Okay.
no one knows what Tadeusz is. And I'm gonna send you something too. I just finished up writing. I mentioned I'm writing a book as well, and I mentioned some of I cited some of your thesis in there. So I'm gonna send that for you to give you some feedback on. It's in feedback stage right now, so I'll send that to you. Yeah,
I'm excited to see that. Well, for those, my name again is Dr. Brent Hogarth. You can find some of the training I'm doing is at the flowresearchcollective.com. We have a few online programs. Specifically, we have some really affordable ones during this current pandemic to support individuals, a lot of distraction management, kind of high performance habits. And then we have a longer 8-week program called Zero to Dangerous. It's all about optimizing kind of one's lifestyle to perform and feel their best more often, and to accelerate learning, creativity. Honestly, I think it's probably the best high performance training program. Obviously I'm biased, but it's really incredible. And we have also a Flow for Writers training. That's another incredible program. Obviously, our founder, Stephen Kotler, is a New York Times bestselling author. So you can check me out there. There you go, at Flow Research Collective. That's one of Stephen's great books, The Rise of Superman. Check me out on Instagram, Brent.T for Thomas.Hogarth. And otherwise, again, Merrick, super cool to jump on this call with you.
I felt I got a high performance coaching session today, so I'm ready to take on the day. I'm in Fox mode now. So
let's go, baby. Respect, brother. We'll talk soon.
okay, peace, brother.
Bye.